Okay, I'm going to tell you what I actually pray for right now, today, before I tell you about anything else. Because everything else I'm going to say today only makes sense once you know where it all landed. I pray for clarity, not for good marks, not for success. I used to pray for strength, but not anymore. Clarity, the ability to see what is actually true in any given moment, what Dharma actually requires, what life is asking of me, not what I want it to be, but actually what it actually is. That is the entirety of my prayer now. One word, spoken with everything that I have, every single morning. Clarity. The difference between that prayer and the prayers I used to make is the difference between two completely different understandings of what God is. And I want to show you how I got here, not because I think that my journey was special, but because I think if you're honest enough, it might be yours too. So I'm going to walk backwards, starting from now, going back to the beginning to show you that moment, that how it has changed everything. Before I arrived at clarity as a prayer, there was a period where I prayed for nothing. Not because I stopped believing, but because I had no clue what I am believing anymore. Everything I had been taught about God started making no sense internally, and I hadn't found what would replace it. That period, the space between losing one understanding and finding another, is the loneliest path I've ever been. Because you can't explain it to someone who haven't been there. If you tell it to someone who with simple faith, they'll tell you to pray harder. If you tell that to someone with no faith and that you're searching, they'll tell you to stop praying at all. And you're somewhere in the middle, completely alone, in a silence that felt like God's absence. And now I think was something else entirely. In that desert period, and I'm calling that deliberately, I read everything and I questioned everything, not for comfort, to find something that could withstand honest examination. The Upanishads, the Gita, what else? But none of it as religion, but as philosophy, a serious inquiry into what is actually real. And slowly, not suddenly, not deliberately, slowly something started to shift. But I am getting ahead of myself because before the desert, there was a specific moment, the crisis, where the old understanding broke. I'm not going to tell you what exactly I prayed for because that specifics belong to me. But I will tell you this. There was something I genuinely needed, not wanted. Genuinely needed. And I prayed for it like with everything I had, every night, every morning, for longer than I want to admit. With that specific kind of honesty, with that specific kind of determination that would leave you exposed. The kind where you are not performing but speaking to something. And you know what the answer was? Silence. Complete silence. And I remember that specific night when I stopped, not because of anger or I thought that God did not exist, but because I realized in a way that I couldn't yet articulate that I had been praying the wrong understanding of what God is. I was treating God like a vending machine. Insert sincerity and blind devotion, uh, choose the outcome, and then expect the delivery. And that silence was not God failing me. That silence was God, was the vending machine revealing itself, as it always was, a projection, my projection of what I needed God to be rather than what actually God is. But I didn't know that yet. The understanding came later. But before that, first, we have to go back further to where that vending machine understanding came from. I grew up with God the way most Indian children do, temple on important days, prayer before exams, rituals whose meaning nobody fully explained but whose presence felt like safety. And I want to be careful here because I don't want to mock that kind of devotion. That version of faith embodied and that specific quality of light inside a temple at dawn. It was real. It gave me something that feeling that uh, made me feel that universe is not separate from me, that there was an order in things, that I was not alone in a meaningless random cosmos. Those are not small gifts, they are enormous gifts given to a child who still did not have a framework yet to receive those things in full depth. The problem was not in the faith, the problem was in the framework. Prayer as transaction, God as the one who grants, me as the one who takes. A relationship that is built entirely on what I need and whether it was arrived. The framework, beautiful yet limited simultaneously, could not survive that silence, that serious silence. And eventually, the serious silence came. What I understand now that I could not understand back then is that rituals were never the problem. Rituals are like container. The problem was what I put in it. See, the container is the infinite, eternal, and what I put in it was limited. The container deserved better, and eventually, through the crisis, through the silence, through the desert, through the arrival of Vedanta, like light through a window that I did not know was there, I found something to put inside it that could actually hold. Vedanta did not give me a new god. It gave me a new set of eyes. The Mandukya Upanishads, that one line that restructured everything. I am Atma Brahma. This self is Brahman. This self is the ultimate reality, not a self that is separate from God and must petition God from a distance, not a self that is abandoned by God when the prayer is not answered, a self that is at its deepest level, not separate from its source of everything that exists. When I first read this, I did not feel enlightened. I felt something quieter. I felt that relief of that specific kind of question that had been eating me alive, now finding an answer large enough to contain in that container. God, not as the one who grants or withholds, but as the consciousness in which everything, including my prayer, including my silence, including my crisis, including my desert, arrives and dissolves. Not separate from me, not distant from me. The very awareness with which I am aware of anything at all. That is what Vedanta pointed at. And that understanding did not make the prayer irrelevant. It made the prayer completely different because now, when I pray, I'm not speaking upward to something above, but inward to the deepest thing I am and asking it to make itself known more clearly in my daily choices. That is what clarity means, not information. The lived sense of what is true right here, right now. I promised I would show you that moment that changed everything else, right? So here it is. It was not a dramatic moment, no voice, no vision, no certainty from above. It was a morning, ordinary, and I was sitting in silence, not meditating, not praying in the old way, just sitting. And for one moment, brief, unrepeatable, completely silent and still, the question of whether God existed stopped feeling like a question, but because the one asking that question and the one being asked felt like they're both the same. I cannot explain that more precisely. I have tried. Every framework I reach for is slightly too small. What I can tell you is this: in that moment, when it felt like complete absence, completely lonely, now it revealed itself as the most complete presence I had ever experienced. God was not absent during the crisis. God was the silence itself, the ground in which the silence arose, the awareness that witnessed every unanswered prayer without flinching. And when I understood that, really understood that, the prayer changed to from asking what I want, what I need, to asking clarity, to see what is already there. I still go to temples, I still do rituals, but now the container is full. What I put inside is large enough to hold the silence alongside the bells, the crisis alongside the incense, the desert alongside the dawn. I pray for clarity every morning, one word, because I have learned slowly through everything that I've just told you. God is not the one who removes the hard things. God is the one who makes you walk through all that without losing what you are. That is enough. That is more than enough. Because that is everything.